We often look to the past to understand ourselves. Tonight, we turn our attention to the year 1857 and the solemn story of Pierre Emile L'Angelier. It's a case that reminds us that behind historical records are real people whose lives were irrevocably changed by the events that transpired. This is their story, as best as it can be told. In the rigid, class-conscious society of Victorian Glasgow, social standing was paramount. It was a world of strict rules and expectations, where one's family name and wealth dictated one's future. Within this world lived Madeleine Smith, the eldest daughter of a respected and prosperous architect. At 21 years of age, she was beautiful, educated, and expected to make a suitable match that would cement her family's position in society. But Madeleine's heart was drawn to a man who existed far outside her rarefied circle. His name was Pierre Emile L'Angelier, a clerk who worked in a city warehouse. Originally from the Channel Islands, L'Angelier was older, of a lower social class, and possessed little in the way of wealth or prospects. By the unyielding standards of the day, he was entirely unsuitable for a young woman of Madeleine's stature. An open relationship was impossible. Their respective worlds were simply too far apart, and so their love was forced into the shadows. Their courtship began in 1855, and with few opportunities to meet in person, it flourished through the written word. Over the course of nearly 2 years, Madeleine Smith and Emile L'Angelier exchanged hundreds of letters. This correspondence became the secret testament to their relationship, a private world built on ink and paper. His letters to her have been lost to history, but her letters to him survived, and they paint a vivid picture of a passionate and ultimately dangerous affair. In her flowing script, Madeleine declared Emile her husband in the eyes of God, pouring out her devotion and frustration with the society that kept them apart. The letters chart the course of their love, from initial flirtations to ardent declarations. As their bond deepened, they began to arrange clandestine meetings. L'Angelier would wait in the lane behind the Smiths' grand house on Blytheswood Square. Late at night, Madeleine would creep down to her basement bedroom window. There, separated by iron bars, they would talk for hours, their secret meetings a desperate attempt to bridge the social chasm between them. The relationship was an intoxicating secret, but it was one built on a fragile and perilous foundation. Every letter written, every whispered word at the window was a risk that threatened Madeleine's reputation and her family's honor. In early 1857, the fragile world that Madeleine and Emile had constructed began to fracture. A new figure entered Madeleine's life, William Harper Minnock. He was everything L'Angelier was not. A wealthy, well-connected Glasgow businessman, Minnock was the ideal suitor in the eyes of Madeleine's parents. Mr. Smith wholeheartedly approved of the match, and soon Madeleine and Mr. Minnock were officially engaged to be married. For Madeleine, this engagement represented a crossroads. On one path was the life society expected of her, a comfortable, respectable marriage to a man of her own class. On the other was Emile L'Angelier, the passionate, secret love who held the power to ruin her. The pressure was immense. She tried to end her relationship with L'Angelier, writing to him that their love had been a cold, cruel dream, and that they must part. But L'Angelier was not a man to be dismissed so easily. He had invested 2 years of his life in their affair and considered Madeleine his wife. He was possessive, emotional, and now deeply wounded. The engagement to William Minnock had not solved Madeleine's problem. It had transformed it into a crisis. Faced with Madeleine's intention to marry another man, Emile L'Angelier's desperation turned to coercion. He refused to accept the end of their affair, and, more importantly, he refused to return her letters. These letters, filled with passionate declarations and intimate details, were now a weapon. In them, she had referred to him as her husband and spoken of their physical intimacy, words that, if made public, would utterly destroy her reputation and her engagement to Mr. Minnock. L'Angelier made his intentions clear. If she did not break off her engagement and marry him, he would go to her father and show him the proof of their long-standing secret affair. The threat terrified Madeleine. The tone of her own letters shifted dramatically. Gone were the professions of love, replaced by frantic, desperate pleas. "I must have my letters back," she wrote. "Give them to me, and I shall be your friend for life." She begged and cajoled, appealing to any lingering affection he might have for her. But her pleas were in vain. L'Angelier held firm, convinced he could force her to honor her promises to him. Madeleine Smith was trapped. The love letters that were once a source of joy had become instruments of blackmail, and the man she once adored had become the greatest threat to her future. As the pressure from L'Angelier mounted, Madeleine Smith's actions took a chilling turn. On 2 separate occasions in February and March of 1857, she visited the apothecary of Murdoch & Co. in Glasgow. On both visits, she purchased a quantity of arsenious acid, more commonly known as arsenic. This was a highly toxic substance, but it was available for purchase from chemists, provided one signed a poison register and gave a reason for its use. Accompanied by a friend on the first visit, Madeleine signed the register as M.H. Smith. She claimed the poison was needed to kill rats at her family's country home near the River Clyde. The purchase was duly recorded by the chemist's assistant. A few weeks later, she returned alone and purchased another quantity of the same substance, once again stating it was for rodent control. In the context of a respectable young woman from a grand household, the explanation was plausible. But in the context of her increasingly desperate situation with Emile L'Angelier, these purchases would later be seen in a far more sinister light. She now possessed not only a powerful motive to be free of her former lover, but also the means to achieve it. The final chapter of Emile L'Angelier's life began late in the evening of Sunday, March 22nd, 1857. He was staying in lodgings on Franklin Place, and as he prepared to go out, he told his landlady, Mrs. Ann Jenkins, that he was going to see Miss Perry, the alias he and Madeleine sometimes used. He mentioned that she was likely to give him a cup of coffee or cocoa. He left his lodgings around 9 p.m. and did not return until several hours later. At approximately 2:30 in the morning, Mrs. Jenkins was awoken by the violent ringing of her bell. It was L'Angelier. He was doubled over in agony, complaining of a severe illness. He was racked with violent stomach pains, intense thirst, and bouts of vomiting. Mrs. Jenkins and another lodger tried to care for him, but his condition rapidly deteriorated. A doctor was summoned, but there was little he could do. Throughout the morning, Emile L'Angelier suffered terribly. By approximately 11 a.m. on Monday, March 23rd, he was dead. The sudden and violent nature of his illness immediately raised suspicions. This was no ordinary sickness. The doctor who attended him refused to issue a death certificate without further investigation. The authorities were notified, and what began as a secret affair was about to become a public sensation. A post-mortem examination was conducted on the body of Emile L'Angelier. The findings were conclusive and shocking. His stomach contained an enormous quantity of arsenic, more than 80 grains, while a dose of just 2 or 3 is considered fatal. There was no doubt that he had been poisoned. The police began their investigation, and the trail quickly led them to the person who had dominated the final years of his life. In his room, detectives discovered the vast collection of letters from Madeleine Smith. As they read through the correspondence, the entire story of the affair unfolded before them. The secret love, the broken promises, the engagement to another man, and L'Angelier's threats of exposure. The motive was laid bare. When investigators checked the poison registers of local apothecaries, they found Madeleine's signature, confirming her purchase of the very poison that had killed her former lover. The evidence was damning. On the 31st of March, Madeleine Smith was arrested and charged with the murder of Pierre Emile L'Angelier. The news scandalized Glasgow. The idea that a young woman of her social standing could be accused of such a cold and calculated crime was almost unthinkable, and the city awaited her trial with breathless anticipation. The trial of Madeleine Smith began on June 30th, 1857, at the High Court of Justiciary in Edinburgh. It became the legal sensation of the decade, drawing massive crowds and intense press coverage. The prosecution, led by the Lord Advocate, James Moncrieff, laid out what it believed was an undeniable case. They presented a clear and compelling narrative. Madeleine Smith, they argued, was a woman desperate to escape a compromising entanglement that threatened her impending marriage into wealth and society. She had the motive to silence Emile L'Angelier and prevent him from showing her incriminating letters to her father and fiancé. She had the means, the arsenic she had purchased just weeks before his death. And, the prosecution contended, she had the opportunity. They argued that L'Angelier had visited her at her bedroom window on the night of March 22nd, where she served him a cup of cocoa laced with the poison he had told his landlady he might receive. Her own letters were read aloud in court, their passionate and desperate words echoing through the chamber, presented as proof of her duplicity and her powerful reason for wanting L'Angelier gone forever. The weight of the evidence seemed overwhelming. To the public and the press, the case against Madeleine Smith appeared to be sealed. The defense was led by one of Scotland's most formidable legal minds, John Inglis. He knew the evidence against his client was powerful, but he also knew it was entirely circumstantial. Inglis systematically dismantled the prosecution's case, highlighting every point of doubt. His central argument was that the prosecution had failed to prove the most crucial element, the final meeting. No witness had seen Madeleine and Emile together on the night of the poisoning. The prosecution's claim that she had administered the poison in a cup of cocoa was pure speculation. Inglis then offered the jury alternative theories. He painted L'Angelier as a dramatic, unstable foreigner, prone to melodrama. Could he have taken his own life in despair over losing Madeleine? Inglis also suggested the possibility of accidental death, noting that arsenic was sometimes used by men in small quantities for cosmetic reasons or as an aphrodisiac. L'Angelier, the defense argued, may have had his own supply and accidentally taken a fatal dose. After 9 days of testimony, the trial reached its conclusion. The jury deliberated for only half an hour. When they returned, they delivered a verdict unique to Scottish law: not proven. It was not a declaration of innocence, but an acknowledgement that the Crown had failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Madeleine Smith was free to go, but the verdict left an indelible cloud of suspicion that would follow her for the rest of her life. In the aftermath of the trial, Madeleine Smith could not remain in Scotland. The notoriety of the case made a normal life there impossible. She left the country and moved to London, where she eventually integrated into artistic and intellectual circles. In 1861, she married an artist's manager named George Wardle. She lived a long and seemingly quiet life, raising a family and eventually moving to the United States, where she died in 1928 at the age of 92. She never spoke publicly about the trial or about Emile L'Angelier. The not proven verdict meant that the case of his death was never officially solved, and it remains one of the great enduring mysteries of the 19th century. Was Madeleine Smith a cold-blooded poisoner who committed a near-perfect crime, or was she the victim of circumstance, wrongly accused in the tragic death of a man she once loved? The letters prove her desperation, and the register proves her purchase of the poison. But the final, critical piece of the puzzle, proof that she administered it, was never found. The truth of what happened in Glasgow on that March night died with its participants, leaving only speculation and a story that continues to fascinate and disturb to this day. Thank you for spending this time with us. Reflecting on these past events is a way of remembering the individuals involved and the impact their stories had on their communities. If you have any thoughts on today's case, we invite you to share them respectfully in the comments below. We hope you will join us again for our next true crime case.